And of course, we've got to think about those parishes in more isolated parts of the diocese where there's probably only quite a small Catholic community, where there was a larger one before. But we can't just abandon them.
No.
We've got to have a fair spread of parishes to make sure that no one's going to be a long way from a church.
Right.
And then once we get the plan together, yes, I think there could be boundary changes, but they'll all have to be carefully worked out. So I'll be drawing on the expertise of a number of people, the canon lawyers, the people who understand the developments of the future, the people who've been reading up on the census and that sort of thing, to help us to understand where we are with all our parishes.
Right. Obviously, one of the things that I think most priests, certainly in the last deanery meeting I was at, was to do with the pastoral sensitivity. So what can you do pastorally to alleviate the worries of parishioners who, they might lose their church, and of course those parishioners who eventually do lose their church when that time arrives? How are you going to deal with them pastorally?
Well, I think what I've been trying to do up to now is to keep people informed. Yeah. So I think that most people are aware that if it doesn't directly affect them, it's going to directly affect a lot of people. Now, what we've got to do as we build these churches and parishes that are going to be the life of the diocese, we've got to make sure that nobody is left behind. So we need to know where the elderly or the housebound are. We need to know how the schools are going to be connected, how the priests are going to spend their time. And this is going to mean a great increase in the lay participation of the parishes. We're not short of priests. We're going to have less priests than we had, but we're not short. But we've got to make sure that priests are doing what they're ordained to do, and that the laity are doing all the other things that they actually do rather better than the priests, to be quite honest. Because priests are not trained accountants. The financial side should be really handed over to the laity. There's lots of ministries for lay people in the parish. And if the priest is trying to do everything, he's actually not being pastorally very effective.
Much of what needs to happen, I think, has arrived from the lack of vocations to the priesthood over the last 30 or 40 years and the falling numbers of Catholics that are attending the church. Do you think that with a streamlined number of churches that it's actually possible to be in a stronger position than we currently are?
Oh, I'm certain of it. We were so lucky, weren't we? We had this flood of Irish priests, so generous in their ministry. They came in droves. And we got used to the number that there were so many priests available. Now, we're not going to have that number of priests. We're not short of priests because compared with just about every other country in the world, we have more priests per head of the Catholic population than they do. So we've just got to learn to use our priests in the way that the Vatican Council indicated. They've got to do what they're ordained to do, and the lay people have got to be part of the running of the church. So I think when we get our 75 or whatever number it will eventually be of parishes and the other churches attached to them, we've got to be very clear in the structures that we place in those parishes that make sure they run efficiently and that there's help. If a layperson is going to take responsibility in a parish to do something, we've got to make sure they're properly trained. And if something goes wrong, they've got to have a phone number that they can phone and expect an answer. And that means probably building up the resources at central services in the diocese.
It's interesting you talk there about, we're not short of priests, and back to what I said before about, people really only hear what they want to hear. That was a statement you made in one of your pastoral letters. And the first thing that was said to me was, after Mass, how can you possibly say that? Look at we had so many more 50 years. I said, no, hang on a minute. That's true, we did, but we had a glut of priests then. What the bishop is saying is that if per person, percentage-wise, per head of people going to church, we're actually still one of the top dioceses in the world. And the other thing, which was very interesting, was from your very first pastoral letter about the planned closures. The first lady that came out of my church said, well, he'll never shut this. It's beautiful, this church. I said, were you listening? It's so difficult sometimes when people just, they do really hear what they want to hear rather than what's being said.
I'm sure. And of course, people have affection. If they've been going to the same church all their lives, the idea that possibly they're not going to be able to do that, that must be very sad for them. And I do sympathise. But we've got to make strong communities, and it can't just be based on the beauty of the church. Yeah. We've got to make sure. If we've got vibrant communities, I think we're going to get more vocations. Because I think everybody will see their role in the church. You know, Newman's thing about God created me for some definite purpose. Well, I think if we can be honest and ask, what's my definite purpose in a good and vibrant community, I think we're going to find more young men saying, well, actually, I'm thinking that maybe priesthood, as I see it now being lived, is exactly what God is asking of me.
Please God, that will be the case. I think that the problems that we are facing here in Salford pretty much are the same as what's being, the whole church around England and Wales are facing the same problems. Do you think that once you unfold, or we've got to the end of this process, and then it starts to kind of unfold in its new form, do you think that this might be held up as some form of model for other bishops to follow around the country?
Well, I think it'd be one of a number of models, because we're all very different dioceses. I've spent time up in Hexham and Newcastle discussing the way they're going around their reorganisation, but they're dealing with a very large rural area that we don't have. It's a much bigger geographical area, so they're having to organise their pastoral areas rather differently, just as the Diocese of Plymouth are having to do the same. We're very different, even though we're largely an urban community. We're very different from say, Westminster, which I know very well. But there are various models. It would be a shame to have one model because it wouldn't fit. We've got to have different options, and we decide, given the way our diocese is now, how best might we draw on these different options to find the best way forward for our own diocese. I think we've got a good model that suits the Diocese of Salford. I think it's going to work because we're taking into account the particular aspects which are the Diocese of Salford. And it's different even from Liverpool or Shrewsbury or Leeds, our neighbours. But we have a way ahead which I think is beginning to look like it's going to work well.
Interesting. Perhaps just one final question to put to you, which was something that happened at the meeting I was at with you and the clergy. And it was one thing that a priest asked almost right at the end of the day, and it was something that I hadn't heard the answer to, and you gave a very clear answer to. So I just wondered if you might give that answer again. And the question was this: what length of time did you kind of have? I think he said, was it a 2-year or a 5-year or an unrolling 10-year plan? And you said something very specific to that answer.
Did I?
You did.
Can you remember what the number was? I was yes. I think if you've got a plan, you've got to see the beginning, a middle, and an end. And it would be really unfair to keep people hanging now that they know something's got to happen. So I think I've been here now for 15 months, and we've got in place a consultation and a way forward. I think that by hopefully the close of this year, by autumn of this year, we will have a firm plan which we then got to implement over, say, the next couple of years.
That's exactly what you said.
Right. That's good. I'm glad I remember that. But I think if we make it much longer than that, then people are going to think, well, it's not happening. This is going to fail. No, I think if people know the plan, they want to see it going into place and actually working. But we've got to acknowledge, there are priests who are nearing retirement. I don't want to bring a guillotine crashing down on them, saying, you've got to move now, or whatever it is. I think there's room for a gentleness and an adaptation, but it's got to be firmly on the rails that we know where we're going.
Bishop John, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So on behalf of both Heavens Road FM, your global audience for this, and of course the local audience of the people of Salford, who I'm sure will be very interested in what you've had to say, because I do think speaking on radio like this is a very different thing. It allows you to say much more than you can in your pastoral letters. So thank you very much for your time.
Well,
tonight.
very happy to have spoken to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening online at heavensroadfm.com, Britain's only choice for Catholic radio. Thanks for being part of our show.
So once again, I'd like to thank Bishop John there for his time, and I hope that both the people of the Salford Diocese have found that very interesting, as well as our much wider audience via the internet. So that's it for this particular episode. And so until next time, I would say to you, God bless and keep the faith.